Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Kirsty and this is Stuck in the Mud. Thank you all for joining me today and taking those steps on your road to recovery from OCD and anxiety. Please remember that if my videos are helping you, to like them and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. In today's video, I want to talk about stop trying to fix your OCD and anxiety. I spent so many years trying to get my OCD and anxiety under control. And little did I know back then that it was actually exacerbating everything, making it so much worse than it needed to be. And I think this is something as sufferers we unknowingly get stuck with, and we actually make things harder than they need to be. And it's only really coming to this realization later in life now that I see where I was going wrong all those years ago. And it's understandable because OCD and anxiety are really devastating things to deal with in life. You know, they're very difficult to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And when they become so much, a big part of your life, they become so big, it becomes ever present in your life, in your daily life. It becomes very hard to break out of that cycle. And I felt like that for a long time. I just felt like it dictated my every move in life. OCD really did just grip me. And it just felt like it controlled my every move. And when it affects your ability to function in life, it becomes a real big problem. And it is devastating because you miss out on so much and you're not living your life fully the way you should, because we all deserve to live a happy and fulfilled life. But unfortunately, when we suffer from these types of disorders, they impact you and they impact your life in such a big way that you don't know any other way to be. And that was me for so many years. I felt like I exhausted every avenue of different therapies, different medications, and they all have their place. I'm not saying they don't, because they have really helped me in my recovery. I'm still to this day on medication, and I still, I advocate therapy. It's a really big part of me getting better, and it's helped me so much. But finding the right therapy for OCD, especially because OCD needs a very specific type of treatment. I didn't find myself that cognitive behavioural therapy worked for me. And everybody's different, let me just say that, because some people respond to things better than others. But for me, I think the way I responded, it was a different approach for OCD. And there is lots of evidence-based treatments that will work for obsessive compulsive disorder, and the main one being exposure and response prevention, which does have its place. But I also realised how what I was actually doing by trying to fix OCD was making my disorder so much worse. And it just really made it so much stronger because I gave it so much time and energy. Because we think as OCD sufferers that if we can solve it, if we can find the answers, if we can get that reassurance, if we can problem solve, analyze and ruminate over everything, that we will get that golden piece of information that will make everything okay. But little did I know all that involvement was actually making my OCD and anxiety so much worse than it ever needed to be. And that is, I think, where a lot of us find ourselves, that we're actually doing the opposite of what we should be doing because we think that's going to be helpful. We have developed a belief that we have to try and fix this, problem solve. We try and stop it, try and divert our attention somewhere else. We distract ourselves. But these are all, we're just fanning the flames. We think we're trying to put the fire out with all this. But it's actually fanning the flames, making the fire stronger, because that's how OCD works. The more involvement we have with it, the bigger and stronger it gets. You know, we think we're fixing a problem, we're actually, you know, making it 10 times harder and worse than it needs to be. So when I discovered metacognitive therapy, which is detached mindfulness, you know, that really has been the beginning of the end of OCD for me. And I'm not saying it doesn't still impact my life to a certain degree, because I do feel we are, you know, we're built differently to other people. We don't process information the same way. And, you know, there is that genetic susceptibility we have as OCD sufferers, and our life experience can bring it out. And, you know, and I still get intrusive thoughts, you know, that's normal. You know, people without OCD get intrusive thoughts, but I don't react to them in the same way. And that is the big difference. And this is what I mean. We're not trying to fix it. Those thoughts are going to come up, and we can't control our thoughts. We just can't. You know, people say you can control your thoughts. You can't. Nobody can. Especially if you suffer from OCD, you know, those intrusive thoughts are going to flow. They're going to flow in and then flow out again, because that's what happens. You know, we get intrusive thoughts, whether we have it or whether we don't. And the reason we notice them so much more is because we're so much more involved in them, you know. And this is where I had to bring my awareness to, was the fact that I was actually making those intrusive thoughts worse by involving myself with them and not actually letting them be, you know, letting them be there, allowing their presence. And this was a big shift for me, was the fact that as hard and as uncomfortable and as abhorrent and as scary or fearful the thoughts were, I had to build up a tolerance to them, you know, which isn't easy. It's not comfortable. And this is the hard part. And this is why recovery is difficult. It's not easy, because you're going to have to face some really hard, uncomfortable feelings and emotions that we usually just want to escape and problem solve our way out and try and fix them. But that is the wrong approach for actual healing in the long term, because all these short-term relief thing, you know, they will give us some comfort in the moment, and like asking for reassurance, that will give you some momentary, you know, relief. But long term, we're actually making the problem worse, and we're just kicking the can down the road, where we're developing beliefs that, you know, this isn't safe. You know, our mind realizes, you know, our brain's thinking, well, you know, there's so much involvement here, this must be important. I'll hang on to that for another time, because you don't feel safe. You don't feel safe with all these intrusive thoughts and these urges to carry out a ritual, you know. So the more we resist it, our brain just hangs on to it harder and grips it even harder and thinks, well, I'll hang on to this for next time, because we're in that fight and flight where our brain just doesn't feel safe. But when we respond in a different way, when we show up to these intrusive thoughts, these urges to carry out a ritual, ask for reassurance, problem solve our way out of something, or just overanalyze something, ruminate on it, when we respond to that with, no, okay, you can do what you like, you can hang out there, but I'm just going to move forward with my day as I should do. We're not distracting ourselves. We're just doing what we should be doing that day. The mundane tasks, going to work, whatever it may be, you know, looking after the kids, just whatever you should be doing that day, you carry on regardless of what crops up in the head, you know, in the mind, an intrusive thought. Okay. That was the hard part, was allowing whatever came up in my consciousness just to be there, just to allow it, you know, whether it was a really scary image in my head, you know, I wouldn't try and solve it, fix it, you know, question it, like, what does that mean? You know, I didn't do that. I just let it be there. Like, okay, you know, it's building that awareness when that actually happens, because we're not always aware that we're doing it. I fully, you know, sympathize with that, because for a long time for myself, I felt like I was involving myself with stuff without even realizing I'd done it, because it was so habitual to me to do that. But once I could gain that awareness to my involvement with these thoughts and these uncomfortable feelings, sensations, whatever it may be, however it shows up, it might be an uncomfortable sensation in the body, I would allow it to be there. And that, having that space for just allowing it was a big breakthrough for me, because it meant that I was showing myself, I was showing the brain that, this isn't important. I don't need to figure this out. And that can sound so counterproductive, because we think that we don't care, or we don't actually, when we don't involve ourselves with it, that we are actually doing ourselves a disservice. We're not that caring person we thought we were, or we're a bad person because we're not trying to get conclusion or certainty over something. We feel like we're bad for not doing that. We think, how can I have that particular thought? How can I have that really violent, sexual, whatever thought? What does that say about me? What does that mean about me? But that is how OCD works. It goes against our true nature, our true values. And that's the reason we get so many intrusive thoughts, is because we are so sensitive and we care so much. As OCD sufferers, I truly believe that. We're very plugged into the world around us, and we're very reactive to what goes on around us, and we care, and we're very sensitive, and things affect us so deeply. And that is why OCD, these things that pop up as just the opposite of who we are, they're ego dystonic. These are the type of thoughts we get, which they don't match with our true values. And that's why we are OCD sufferers, and why we get so many of these. So once I could really understand that and grasp that, I could go, right, okay, and this isn't denying, because OCD will always try and pop up and say, well, am I denying the fact that I'm a bad person because I'm just accepting that this is OCD and not accepting that I'm actually a bad person? No. OCD will always try and hijack everything. If it can't work in one way, it's going to find another way to try and hijack you. This is how OCD operates. And it will try and get you another way. So it'll say, well, this isn't actually OCD. You are a bad person, but, you're trying to make it sound like OCD so that it gets you off the hook. That's what OCD does. And we have to realize that. We have to realize that OCD works in this kind of way, because it will never leave you alone. It will keep you just reeled in. It's just going to hook you and reel you in again and again if we don't say, it's not happening. Thanks for trying to keep me safe, OCD. Trying to keep, everything clear and certain, because that's what it is. We have the doubting disorder. We want ultimate certainty, and our brain is just trying to keep us safe, but we can't live like that. We can't have that kind of certainty in life over everything. But the thing is, we kind of do get the clarity when we don't involve ourselves so much, because we can feel so confused about everything when we're ruminating, we're doing those rituals, we're problem solving, we're trying to fix everything. Everything becomes so cloudy and confusing. But the actual clarity comes when we don't do that, when we realize that, what was I doing? I look back on some of my subtypes of OCD, the obsessions I had, and I look back and think, it's crazy how much it just took over my life. I really believed that I was that terrible person for thinking such a thought. But I look back on it now with clarity and see that it was just OCD all along. It was just trying to keep me hooked in, try and keep me, in that loop, just going round and round. I can see that now, but that's because I did eventually think, no more, thanks for trying to keep me safe, but not today. I'm going to move forward with my day. I'm going to allow all those intrusive thoughts to be there. I'm not going to try and push them away or try and stop them. I'm going to let them come in on their own. I might feel it in the body. I might feel the uncomfortable sensation of anxiety in the body. I'm going to feel discomfort with it allowing it to be present with me, letting it kind of move through me, even though I'm aware of it, but moving through it. And that's a powerful thing with OCD, because once our brain realizes with, repeated, we have to be consistent with this. We're going to have setbacks. That's normal. That's part of the healing process. Just don't get worried about that. You're going to get setbacks where you reels you in a bit, but we can just hold that line. Okay, I know what happened there. That's fine. Next time is another opportunity to do it again. Let it be there. Allow it to be present with you. And they will fade on their own. These intrusive thoughts, these urges to carry out a ritual, whatever it may be, they will fade on their own. But it does take consistency and practice. It's not going to be a quick fix recovery. And this is something else I had to learn over time, because I was just desperate to escape it, not realizing all the time by doing this, trying to fix everything, that I was actually prolonging my experience with this disorder, because it just became my life. I didn't realize that it was just making everything worse and making it stronger, having that stronger hold onto me, taking away any clarity I had over everything. It just made everything so much more overwhelming and confusing. So that is my advice to anyone out there, that trying to fix this in any other way is likely to fail. We have to, exposure and response prevention, big part of it, exposing us to our fearful things and fearful thoughts, fearful situations, whatever it may be. And response prevention, that is a big part of it. But that comes with, I think this comes part and parcel of metacognitive therapy, because they're different things, don't get me wrong, and I've talked about this in other videos in the past. They are different approaches, because metacognitive therapy is a do-nothing approach. We allow everything to be there, and which has worked great for me. But naturally, you're going to come up against, you're going to be exposed to things that potentially can trigger you. So that in itself is exposure, but we respond differently to it. We expose, but we let it be there. We allow it. We're going to feel like, oh, this is going to set me off. This is going to start me, down the rabbit hole for OCD. But I let it be there. I let that thought be there. Okay, I'll just move forward. I'll do what I need to do. Let it hang out for a while. As long as that may be, it'll fade away on its own. And it truly does work. And it really has been life transforming for myself. And I know for other people that this is really the approach of allowing has been so amazing for me personally, because I really feel like we overcomplicate everything by trying to fix everything. And like I said, medication, therapy definitely has its place, and it's been helpful for me. But that was only part of the whole package that actually helped me in my personal recovery journey. And, we do need to have that element where we're allowing everything to be there, because our brain is going to learn from that. It's going to learn that this is safe, it's okay, that these scary things are there, but I don't need to respond to it. It doesn't say anything about me. It doesn't define me. The thoughts I think, they don't say anything about me. It's just a thought that pops up in our head. We can't control thoughts, but we can control the thinking, which is the rumination, the problem solving, the fixing. Distraction is just different. It's very different. People think that, well, isn't that surely all this is just distracting yourself from it? It isn't. It's very different, because we're not getting rid of it. We're letting it hang out in our heads, or the feeling, the sensation in the body, the anxiety we feel. We're not trying to push it away. That's very different. That is distracting ourselves from it. But with this approach, you're feeling it. You feel everything that arises. You allow everything that arises in the body, the sensations, the anxiety, the discomfort, the urge to carry out a ritual, or, the urge the trigger with an obsession. You know, you allow that discomfort to be there, that feeling like you need to fix this, but you allow that to be there, that urge to fix it. And that has been a major, major breakthrough for me, and it can be for other people. And I so wish people could understand this about OCD, that the more we try and involve ourselves, the more, you know, we try and fix everything, we're actually making it so much worse than it needs to be. And this could have saved me so many years. This is the thing of torture, because it really is torture with OCD and anxiety. Unless you fully experience this, you have no idea of how much of an impact this has over your life, how devastating it is for not just you, but your family members as well. You know, it really does impact the whole family, OCD. I've had it to such devastating levels in my life, you know, and I really wish, and this is why I do these videos, is to help other people really realize there is hope. You can get better from this. You can come out the other side of this and actually live a full life. The fact that you're sensitive, you know, you care, you know, these are all quality factors. But because we care so much with OCD, it can actually make things harder, because we don't like the fact that, you know, we're ignoring all these things that thoughts we think, the obsessions, you know, we feel, like I said, we're doing ourselves a disservice by not involving ourselves. But the thing is, these are all great qualities, but we just need to learn how to adapt to them, because they're amazing things. We should never try and change ourselves, because the world needs more sensitive and caring people. But we also need to function normally on a day-to-day basis and live that life that, you know, you deserve to. You deserve to live a full life and enjoy your life. And it's just learning to respond differently to our thoughts, our feelings, the sensations. And this is really the way I have done it. And I hope it can help you guys out there too. So I really hope this video has been helpful in establishing why we shouldn't try and fix our OCD and anxiety. Allowing, for me, has definitely been the key. Allowing is so powerful. More powerful than I ever realized years ago. You know, I never thought, it sounds so simple, sounds so easy, but it can definitely work. So I hope it works for you guys too. So let me know what you think about this in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.